There comes a moment in every generation when a quiet voice carries more weight than the loudest stage. It is not the voice of power or fame itself, but the voice that stood nearby while power and fame were still only fragile ideas. This is one of those moments. A mother who spent decades watching dreams wobble before they walked finally speaks, not to defend success, not to polish legend, but to remind people of something far more important than achievement. When she breaks her silence, it is not with drama, but with clarity. And if you listen closely, you begin to realize this message was never meant just for one famous son. It was meant for anyone who has ever felt late, behind, misunderstood, or quietly determined. She does not begin with victory. She begins with uncertainty. With the truth that brilliance is often invisible at the start, even to those closest to it. She speaks of years where nothing looked extraordinary from the outside. Years where effort did not guarantee comfort, and curiosity did not guarantee applause. What she makes clear is that the world loves the finished story but ignores the unfinished chapters. Yet it is in those unfinished chapters that character is built. Before the headlines, before the companies, before the global attention, there was simply a child who asked too many questions and refused easy answers. And there was a mother who learned that protecting a child does not mean shielding them from struggle, but teaching them how to stand inside it without breaking. She reminds us that discipline is not cruelty, and freedom is not neglect. True care lives somewhere in between. It lives in allowing mistakes without humiliation, in encouraging ambition without entitlement. She watched failure arrive early and often, not as a dramatic collapse, but as quiet disappointments that could have easily convinced a less stubborn mind to settle. She saw rejection letters, financial stress, and moments where persistence looked irrational. What she noticed, and what she wants you to notice now, is that resilience rarely announces itself. It shows up as showing up again, and again, long after the excitement fades. There is no attempt to paint a perfect childhood or an effortless rise. Instead, she speaks of awkwardness, of isolation, of feeling different in ways that were not celebrated. She speaks of how society is quick to label what it does not understand, especially in young people. Too quiet, too intense, too obsessed, too impractical. She asks you to consider how many futures have been crushed under those labels. How many ideas died because someone decided that fitting in mattered more than finding out. Her message is not to glorify suffering, but to stop fearing it so much that you abandon yourself. She explains that belief is not loud encouragement shouted from the sidelines. Belief is consistency. It is the calm presence that says, "You can try," without promising safety or success. It is the refusal to panic when the path looks unconventional. She did not know how everything would turn out. She did not have a blueprint for raising a world changer. What she had was trust in effort, in learning, and in time. She trusted that curiosity, when protected instead of mocked, eventually finds a direction, one of the most powerful things she shares is that waiting is part of the process. Waiting for understanding. Waiting for skills to catch up to imagination. Waiting for the world to notice what you are building quietly. In a culture obsessed with instant results, she urges patience not as passivity, but as strength. Growth is not always visible. Roots deepen in darkness. She wants you to stop measuring your worth by how quickly things happen and start measuring it by how faithfully you keep going. She speaks to parents, but also to teachers, mentors, leaders, and friends. She asks them to reconsider how they respond to unconventional minds. To remember that encouragement can be life-altering, and dismissal can be devastating. She admits she made mistakes. She doubted at times. She worried. But she learned that doubt does not disqualify belief. You can worry and still support. You can fear and still allow someone to try. Then she turns directly to those who feel behind. Those who look at success stories and only see the finish line. Not the years of confusion before it. She wants you to know that being late is not being lost. That there is no universal schedule for meaning. Some people bloom early and fade. Others struggle for decades before alignment happens. Timing is not a moral judgment. It is simply timing. Stop punishing yourself for not matching someone else's clock. She speaks gently but firmly about responsibility. About the importance of learning to take care of yourself, to work, to contribute, even while dreaming big. She rejects the myth that visionaries float above reality. The ones who endure learn how to survive while they build. They take jobs that are not glamorous. They live simply. They endure embarrassment. They understand that independence is not just financial, but psychological. It is the ability to think for yourself even when no one agrees with you yet. She also speaks about kindness, not as softness, but as intelligence. She observed that brilliance without empathy collapses inward. That ambition without respect leaves destruction behind. She watched how learning to listen, to apologize, to treat people fairly mattered just as much as learning to solve complex problems. She wants you to remember that how you build matters as much as what you build. There is a quiet warning in her words. A warning against chasing validation instead of mastery. Against mistaking attention for progress. She saw how easily external praise can distort internal motivation. She urges you to protect your curiosity from the noise of approval and criticism alike. Do the work because it matters to you, not because it trends. Learn deeply, not loudly. She acknowledges that the road is harder now in many ways. That the pressure to succeed early is intense. That comparison is constant. But she insists that the fundamentals have not changed. Focus still compounds. Effort still matters. Integrity still lasts longer than hype. She wants you to unplug from the panic of falling behind and reconnect with the patience of building something real. Her message is not about becoming famous or wealthy. It is about becoming capable. About developing the confidence that comes from competence. She reminds you that success, however you define it, is not something you chase directly. It is something that emerges when preparation meets opportunity. And preparation is mostly invisible. She speaks about fear, not as an enemy, but as a signal. Fear tells you that you care. The mistake is letting fear make decisions for you. She watched moments where playing safe would have been easier, where choosing comfort would have been understandable. But she learned that growth almost always asks for temporary discomfort. Not recklessness, but courage. She returns again and again to learning. Lifelong learning. Learning after failure. Learning after success. She refuses the idea that education ends at school or that expertise makes curiosity unnecessary. She believes the most dangerous moment is when someone decides they already know enough. She encourages humility, the kind that keeps doors open long after ego would have slammed them shut. As she continues, the message becomes less about one family and more about a philosophy of living. A way of seeing struggle not as proof of inadequacy, but as evidence of engagement. You only struggle with things that matter to you. She wants you to stop romanticizing ease and start respecting endurance. She talks about reinvention. About starting over without shame. About changing direction without apology. She herself lived through multiple careers, relocations, and resets. She knows firsthand that identity is not fixed. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to begin again, even when others expect you to stay the same. There is also gratitude in her words. Gratitude for teachers who did not give up. For employers who gave second chances. For people who saw potential before results. She encourages you to be that person for someone else. To remember that small acts of belief can echo for decades. She addresses failure directly, stripping it of drama. Failure is data. Failure is feedback. Failure is not a verdict on your worth. She saw how resilience is built not by avoiding failure, but by learning how to recover from it without losing self-respect. She wants you to stop hiding your failures and start extracting their lessons. She does not promise happiness. She promises meaning. She does not promise certainty. She promises growth. She knows that the most fulfilling lives are not the easiest ones, but the most engaged ones. Lives where effort aligns with values, even when outcomes are uncertain. As her words settle, there is a sense that this message is less about listening to her and more about listening to yourself. About remembering the interests you abandoned because they felt impractical. The questions you stopped asking because they felt inconvenient. The ambitions you shrank because they felt too big for where you were at the time. She invites you to reclaim those parts, slowly and responsibly. To stop waiting for permission. To stop assuming that clarity comes before action. Often, clarity follows effort. You learn by doing. You discover direction by moving. She closes not with a declaration, but with an invitation. An invitation to be patient with yourself. To work hard without becoming hard. To stay curious longer than is comfortable. To believe that your current chapter, however messy, is not the final one. If you listen closely, you realize she is not speaking as the mother of a famous figure. She is speaking as someone who has watched human potential unfold in real time, with all its delays and detours. Her silence was never emptiness. It was observation. And now that she speaks, the message is simple and demanding at the same time: keep going. Keep learning. Keep building. Not for applause, not for comparison, but because becoming capable, curious, and resilient is always worth the effort. Even when no one is watching yet. Especially then, she continues by speaking about pressure, the quiet kind that doesn't come from critics but from expectations. Expectations placed by society, by family, by the invisible rules of what a successful life is supposed to look like at a certain age. She admits how easy it is, especially for young people, to confuse expectations with destiny. How many paths are abandoned not because they are wrong, but because they don't look respectable soon enough. She urges you to question whose approval you are chasing, and whether it truly belongs to you. She reflects on how comparison steals more joy than failure ever could. Watching others surge ahead can make your own progress feel invisible, even when it is real. She learned that comparison flattens stories. It erases context, struggle, and luck, and leaves only outcomes. She wants you to remember that you are comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel, and that this habit quietly corrodes confidence over time. She speaks about loneliness, an emotion rarely discussed in success narratives. The loneliness of being different. The loneliness of caring deeply about ideas others dismiss. The loneliness of staying with a problem long after the room has emptied. She does not present loneliness as a flaw, but as a companion that often walks beside originality. Not everyone who feels lonely is ahead of their time, but many who are ahead of their time feel lonely. The key, she says, is not to let loneliness turn into bitterness or superiority. Stay connected where you can. Stay human. She returns again to the idea of work, not as punishment, but as structure. Work gives shape to ambition. Without structure, even the strongest desire dissolves into frustration. She observed that consistency mattered more than bursts of brilliance. Showing up daily, even when uninspired, even when tired, quietly compounds into capability. She reminds you that motivation is unreliable, but habits are loyal. She speaks candidly about money, stripping it of both shame and worship. Financial struggle, she explains, is not a sign of moral failure, nor is wealth proof of wisdom. Money is a tool that amplifies who you already are. Learning to manage it responsibly, to live within your means while planning for growth, is part of maturity. She watched how discipline in small things created freedom in larger ones. There is a section of her message that lingers on humility. On the ability to remain teachable even when confidence grows. She saw how arrogance closes doors quietly, while humility keeps them cracked open. The people who last are not the ones who announce their intelligence, but the ones who keep refining it. She encourages you to ask questions longer than feels comfortable. To listen even when you think you already understand. She addresses criticism next, both deserved and undeserved. She explains that criticism is unavoidable once you do anything visible or meaningful. Trying to avoid it leads only to paralysis. The skill is learning discernment, knowing when to adjust and when to ignore. Not all feedback deserves equal weight. Learn who to listen to. Learn who has earned the right to influence you. She speaks about courage in ordinary moments. Not dramatic acts, but small decisions, applying anyway, speaking up anyway, trying again anyway. Courage, she says, is rarely loud. It is often quiet persistence in the face of uncertainty. She saw how courage built confidence over time. Not the other way around. She reflects on identity, warning against tying your self-worth too tightly to a single role or outcome. Careers change. Titles disappear. Public opinion shifts. If your sense of self depends entirely on external success, it will always feel fragile. Build an identity rooted in values, curiosity, integrity, effort. Those survive transitions. She acknowledges luck, honestly and without apology. Being in the right place at the right time matters. Meeting the right people matters. But luck favors preparation. Opportunities are meaningless if you are not ready to meet them. She wants you to focus less on chasing luck and more on becoming ready. She speaks to those who feel unseen. Who work hard without recognition. Who wonder if their effort matters. She tells you that obscurity is not wasted time. It is often where the deepest learning happens. When no one is watching, you are free to experiment, to fail, to grow without performance. Use this time well. She also touches on responsibility to others. Success, when it comes, carries weight. Influence shapes lives. She believes it matters deeply how you treat people when you have leverage. Power reveals character more than struggle ever does. She urges kindness not as charity, but as duty, her words slow as she speaks about endurance. About staying with long problems. About resisting the urge to quit simply because progress feels slow. Some challenges are meant to take years. Some visions require patience that feels unreasonable. But the satisfaction of finishing something difficult cannot be replicated by shortcuts. She reminds you that rest is not weakness. That exhaustion distorts judgment. That caring for your body and mind is not indulgence, but maintenance. Burnout does not prove commitment, sustainability does. Pace yourself for a long life, not a short sprint. As she continues, the message feels less like advice and more like permission. Permission to take your time. Permission to be imperfect. Permission to grow quietly. She does not glamorize struggle, but she refuses to pathologize it. She leaves you with the idea that meaning is not found, but built. Built through daily choices, through responsibility accepted, through effort invested without guarantees. And she wants you to understand this deeply: you are not behind. You are becoming. Her voice, steady and unhurried, suggests that silence was never absence. It was patience. And patience, she reminds you, has always been one of the most underrated forms of strength. She goes on to speak about vision, and how it often arrives incomplete. People wait for certainty before they act, believing confidence must come first. She learned the opposite. Confidence grows after movement, not before it. Vision sharpens through effort. You don't need to see the entire road to take the next step. You only need enough clarity to move forward without betraying your values. She reflects on the danger of comfort. Comfort, she says, is persuasive. It convinces you that tomorrow will always be available, that risk can be postponed indefinitely. She watched how many capable people delayed their potential into disappearance, not because they lacked talent, but because they waited for the perfect moment. Perfection is patient, but progress is urgent. Life does not reward those who wait forever. She speaks about fear of judgment, especially in the age of constant visibility. How the possibility of being misunderstood keeps people silent. She reminds you that misunderstanding is inevitable when you do something original. If everyone understands you immediately, you are likely repeating something familiar. Growth requires tolerance for being misread. She returns to the subject of character, emphasizing that who you become along the way matters more than the destination. Ambition without ethics eventually collapses under its own weight. She watched how small compromises, ignored early, grow into habits that are difficult to escape. Integrity, she says, is easiest to practice when no one is watching. She talks about setbacks that feel unfair. Moments when effort does not lead to reward. When others succeed with less work. She does not deny the frustration. She validates it. But she warns against letting resentment poison persistence. Bitterness drains energy that could be used to improve your position. Focus on what you can control, your skills, your preparation, your response. She speaks to creativity, not just artistic creativity, but problem-solving creativity. The courage to try approaches that haven't been approved yet. She noticed that innovation often looks like foolishness before it looks like genius. If you wait for permission, you will always be late. She reflects on discipline again, framing it as self-respect. Discipline is not about punishment, it's about alignment. About doing today what your future self will thank you for. She observed that people who respect their own time tend to respect others' time as well. This creates trust, and trust creates opportunity. She acknowledges grief. The grief of paths not taken. The grief of realizing you can't do everything. She believes maturity includes learning to let go without regret. Choosing one direction means releasing another. That loss is real, and it deserves acknowledgement. But regret should not freeze you. It should clarify what you value. She speaks about resilience not as toughness, but as flexibility. The ability to bend without breaking. To adapt without abandoning your core. Rigid people shatter under pressure, flexible people absorb shock and continue forward. She wants you to cultivate resilience through curiosity rather than stubbornness. She addresses doubt, especially self-doubt. Not as something to eliminate, but something to manage. Doubt keeps you honest. It pushes you to prepare better. The danger is letting doubt make decisions for you. Let it inform, not command. She returns to community. Even the most independent minds need support. She reminds you that asking for help is not weakness, it is strategy. No meaningful achievement is entirely solitary. Learn to build relationships based on respect, not utility. Give credit freely. Gratitude multiplies goodwill. She talks about responsibility again, this time inward. Responsibility for your reactions, your habits, your growth. Blaming circumstances may feel accurate, but it rarely feels empowering. Ownership restores agency. Agency restores momentum. She reflects on time, calling it the most misunderstood resource. Time rewards consistency, not intensity. Small efforts repeated outperform grand efforts abandoned. She urges you to think in decades, not days. To invest in skills that compound. To choose patience over panic. She speaks gently to those who feel tired. Who wonder if the effort is worth it. She does not shame exhaustion. She acknowledges it. But she asks you not to confuse fatigue with failure. Rest, recover, then continue. Stopping permanently because of temporary exhaustion is a tragedy she has seen too often. She reminds you that progress is rarely linear. There will be reversals. Plateaus. Long stretches where nothing seems to change. These moments are not signs to quit, they are tests of commitment. Can you continue without applause? She emphasizes discernment again. Not every opportunity is your opportunity. Saying yes to everything weakens focus. Learn to say no without guilt. Protect your energy for what aligns with your values and long-term vision. She speaks about humility one last time, this time paired with courage. Humility without courage becomes self-doubt. Courage without humility becomes recklessness. Balance both. Know what you don't know, and be brave enough to learn it. As her message deepens, it becomes clear she is not offering instructions, but principles. Principles that survive changing circumstances. Technologies evolve. Industries shift. Attention moves. But patience, effort, integrity, and curiosity remain relevant. She invites you to imagine yourself years from now, looking back at this moment. What would that future version thank you for doing now? Starting earlier. Being kinder to yourself. Taking a risk you were afraid to take. Let that imagined gratitude guide your next decision. Her voice remains steady, almost quiet, as if she knows that the most important truths don't need volume. They need space. Space to sink in. Space to challenge comfortable assumptions. She reminds you again that silence does not mean stagnation. Some of the most important growth happens internally, preparing you for a moment you cannot yet see. If you listen carefully, you realize the message is not pushing you to hurry, but urging you not to waste your becoming. You are allowed to move slowly. You are not allowed to stop believing in your capacity to grow.